Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Total Warhammer 3. I'm Lord Forrent, and today we've got another guide for the Empire, this time going over the Empire units. This is part of a larger series and playlist on all the Empire factions and their mechanics, very broken down, as well as unique factions and overall Total Warhammer 3 guides in general. So check those out. If you like this video or the other videos, like, comment, subscribe, you know, all that great stuff. And let's jump right into it. So, the Empire is a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none faction to some degree. Although I would make an argument their artillery and war machines are at the top tier. The Empire has a solid roster in basically any category you could ask for, other than maybe missile cav. But then again, not many factions have good missile cav. So let's get started with infantry and then we'll move through it. So in terms of infantry, your base unit here is Spearmen. This is a terrible unit in my opinion. It should only be used until you get Spearmen with shields or even swordsmen. Early on, its really only purpose is to charge defense against large foes usage, and unless for some reason you're fighting Bretonnia and you're needing to fight Cav, not many factions are going to have large foes, or you're fighting ogres early game. Honestly, build it to fill out your armies, then replace them later on. Now, the upgraded version, Spearmen with Shields, is significantly better than the previous. So if we click on this and we go over here, you will see the biggest change is an increase in melee defense. So you'd think, okay, it's about the same. No, it has shields. Shields, of course, are the great mechanic of blocking small arms fire. Any unit with a shield could almost be said to be a tier higher than its tier ranking here. It says it's a tier 1. I would argue more tier 2 just because it doesn't die to range fire easily, as well as having decent melee defense. Its job is not to kill things, it is to hold the line so your other units can kill them. Just remember that. You're not going to win a melee fight with Spearmen with shields. At best, you delay. Now, the next unit is the Empire Swordsman. This is actually a fairly good unit. If we compare it to the Spearmen, which they appear roughly the same time, it's better in melee attack, worse in melee defense, has more weapon strength and charge bonus. This is your killing unit in like the first 5 to 10 turns in melee combat. Spearmen are not going to kill that much. Swordsmen will kill some more. Honestly, though, any army that uses swordsmen, even though they have shields, could be replaced by spearmen with shields. The difference is if you're fighting other Empire factions who have lots of spearmen, you're fighting, say, the Skaven, those are really the only two factions that you're going to be able to fight evenly in melee combat, so you're much better off having spearmen with shields, delaying to use ranged cav, artillery, or spells to beat them. Now, I'm going to skip the Regiments of Renown because they're always fairly good. They're basically just an upgraded version of the lower level. Now, we get into the Halberdiers, or Halabards, or Halberdiers. I say it wrong. People disagree. Whatever. Anyway, this unit is arguably, in my opinion, the best singular Empire infantry unit. Its stats do not look significantly better than Spearmen, and in fact, it has no shield. But let me make an argument here for this unit being really, really good. It is armor piercing, which is not something you will see on the lower tier infantry, and in fact, most of the empires outside of great swords are not armor piercing, which means the Empire does struggle with later factions with lots of armor. This unit, Halberdiers, opposes it. You're really good at killing infantry. Also, it's anti-large, so it's against anti-cavalry or even some monstrous large units. It's got charge defense, meaning it reflects some of the damage. It's really good. Overall, it's a very solid unit. Now, once you do technology and you get the upgraded and you get like expert charge defense, this faction will devastate cavalry or charge units. If you're fighting someone who's Bretonian for some reason, this unit will absolutely devastate them in melee combat. They will charge into your basically pikes or spears here. It's actually a halberd, and they will die. This can actually kill a lot of units. It's got really good melee defense, and once you improve it, I have seen this unit hold out against elite vampire units and others. It won't win, but it will go roughly even, which is impressive for only a tier 2 unit with upgrades. Now, the next one is Flagellants. This is not one of my favorite units. It's a solid unit, and it's even better if you're playing the Cult of Sigmar faction, who has bonuses for it. Otherwise, unless you need a unit that is unbreakable and is going to stand in place and die, you don't really need to use this unit. Its killing power is not that amazing if we compare it to the Halberdiers. Its attack is better, but its melee defense is significantly lower, and it's lacking the same level of armor and shields. The only thing it does is not rout. If you need a unit to tie up a handful of, say, zombies or a monster unit for a minute, this is your unit. Otherwise, I wouldn't use this one in particular. It's a damage dealer. The damage dealing, I say, is a little bit questionable. Now, the next one is Great Swords, and this is the really final infantry unit for the Empire. It has its place in an army, even with halberdiers. However, it has its weaknesses as that it's not anti-cav or anti-large, but against almost every other mid-tier infantry unit, it's going to do very well. It's very heavily armored. It's got good stats. It's armor piercing, meaning it will tear through armored units. You get a lot of these in the higher level Empire garrisons and forts, where they can easily devastate massive amounts of green skins or zombies and stuff. It is a much better unit than the stats would lead you to believe. I wouldn't bring into a army more than 3 or 4 of them. You're much better off bringing more halberdiers. Anyway, that's the infantry for the Empire. Now let's look at cavalry. So the first level of cavalry is Empire Knights. Honestly, unless you're a huge cav lover, I would skip this unit entirely. Its stats are not amazing. It's good at flanking and killing enemy artillery or mages. Otherwise, it won't stand in a fight against almost anything. You're much better off going to the next tier, where you have a choice between Reiksguard and Knights of the Black Rose. So the Knights of the Black Rose was recently added. I suspect there's going to be some changes, because right now they're basically a superior version of the Reiksguard. The only difference here, if we look at them, is the Reiksguard is slightly better at charge bonuses. The Knights of the Black Rose are overall better in combat and harder to kill with more health, and only a slight increase in upkeep. Basically, don't take Right Guard anymore unless you've got bonuses for it. Just go straight Knights of the Black Rose if you can get it. Now, this is of course compared to the next unit, Knights of the Blazing Sun, which in my opinion really has no place in the Empire armies unless you're fighting Nurgle factions or vampire factions. Those heal. The unique thing about Knights of the Blazing Sun is they have flaming attacks, which reduces the amount of healing a unit gets while it's on fire. Quite useful against hordes of zombies. This is like the ultimate thing for to use against Gorse, who loves his zombies and loves healing them. The sad fact is, overall, against everybody else, Knights of the Black Rose is the superior choice. And the other problem is you get Knights of the Blazing Sun towards the late early game, middle game, where at which point you should either be beating your neighbors. So if you're Franz or the Dark Lady of Nuln, you would already be winning against vampires, or you're losing so much you're not going to get this unit. So I kind of ignore it. The next one, you have an interesting choice. You've got Demigryph Knights and Demigryph Knights with Halberds. What's the difference here? Well, it's not the biggest difference. One's anti-large, the other's anti-infantry. This one has shields, this one does not. It's kind of your choice which you would prefer. I tend to like ones with shields more because they tend to last slightly longer when they're being shot by range units. But honestly, this is a better killing unit, the one with halberds. Make your choice. This is the pinnacle of the Empire cavalry units. It's not as amazing as, say, Bretonnia, but it will do its job killing off outrider units and killing backline mages, archers, artillery, and can go toe-to-toe with some lords for a short while. Overall, pick it if you want. Now, That is it for the cavalry and chariots, although the Empire really doesn't have chariots in this part of the lineup. So let's move over to missile infantry. We'll do artillery, war machines, and stuff later because that's one of the more complex categories. So under missile infantry, your base unit is archers. This is actually a decent range unit. Obviously, it's weak versus armor, but if you're fighting people without armor, it will do its job. It will kill a decent amount of them, and it will then lose in melee combat. If you've got a line of infantry of spearmen with shields, this is probably going to be one of your first units you have shooting. You can recruit it almost anywhere. If you're fighting a siege defense with walls, it will do its job and kill a decent amount of the enemies on the wall. Don't expect it to win in any fights. Don't expect it to win the battle for you, but it will do, I'd say, roughly go even so long as it doesn't get pounced on in melee combat at the beginning. Now, the next unit is a unit I'm still questioning how to use entirely properly. It is the Free Company Militia. The Cult of Sigmar faction gets bonuses towards this. Everyone else really does not that much. It's basically a hybrid unit. It's slightly better in melee combat than the archers. It's still weak versus armor, but it's also a ranged unit. Honestly, you could replace this unit with an archer company and an infantry unit, and you'd be superior. You could use this to kind of skirmish early on. The problem is its speed is particularly low, so most factions can catch it. Placed properly on the flank, it can do some decent damage, fire for a while, and then march into combat. But unless you're able to protect it from being immediately pounced on in melee, don't bring it to the battles. The next unit is crossbowmen. This is the first good missile unit of the Empire that you'll probably see in a battle. It's got good range. It does decent missile strength. It has decent to poor melee stats. It will do its job. If you put a line of these behind a line of infantry, it will kill things. And it will kill them fairly effectively. It is not great against armor, though, so just be aware of that. Honestly, though, it's hard to go bad with an army of spearmen with shields or halberdiers combined with crossbowmen early game. That's going to be the core of your early game Empire army. Followed that up with handgunners. Now, gunner units in Total War Hammer 3 are tricky to use, and before you bring a lot of them to a battle, make sure you know how to use them because they will not shoot through your units. They have to shoot straight at the enemy. Same thing for the Free Company Militia, usually less of an issue because they're in the front lines. Archers, crossbowmen fire in an arc, so they can fire over your units. Handgunners do not. Just like a normal bullet in real life, it goes straight, meaning you either need to have them fire a couple volleys, then retreat behind your lines, or flank with them, or hope that you're fighting a ranged battle, but I don't know why you would be. They are not much better at melee combat than their other units. In fact, I think they're largely worse. They have a shorter range, meaning they will be killed by crossbowmen. And overall, they have their place. If you can flank with these guys can kill hundreds of enemy units because of their armor-piercing ability. If they get jumped on in melee, they're going to die. This is a unit where if you don't know how to use skirmish mode, learn how to use skirmish mode in guns before you deploy in battle. Ideally, they fire 3 to 4 volleys, then retreat behind your line, move out to the sides, flank, and fire. If they get jumped on, they are going to die, and you will feel really bad for bringing them to the battle. And now, the next range unit is Huntsman. Think a upgraded version of crossbowmen with significantly higher upkeep, and overall not that much more amazing range ability. They're slightly better in combat. They're faster. They're leadership. They have stock, which is nice, so you can flank with them. They're technically anti-large, which is kind of nice. In fact, they get a bonus to missile strength when shooting large units. You want to use them to target enemy monster units, or to some degree cav, but really monster units, flying units, that's where they excel. They are a better version of the crossbowmen, but if you bring a lot of crossbowmen, you really don't necessarily want to delete them for Huntsman. Good, though, if you can get them into the field. They come a little bit later to the game, though. The next unit, Hawkland Long Rifles. I really like this. This kind of feels like an old Empire Total War unit. It's basically 16 guys, so it's really tiny unit size with a really long range. These would be ideal skirmishers or targeting units for targeting lords, mages. If they get caught by any unit, basically, even Skaven slaves, they're gonna suffer. 16 units is a minuscule unit size, regardless what size units you're playing on. They do a lot of damage if you put them on walls and sieges, or you use them to flank fire and pick off enemies. Similar rule to the handgunners, though, they fire straight, so just be aware of that. But their range is going to outrange almost every other ranged infantry unit in the game, which is great. Now, the last of the Empire ones is the Nuln Ironsides. This is almost a straight upgrade from the handgunners. Everything is better. Armor, leadership, fighting ability, missile strength, ammunition, anything you can ask for except for range. Basically, once you get Nuln Ironsides and you can afford the cost, be aware that it is significantly higher than handgunners, you want to replace your handgunners with Nuln Ironsides. The difference of the armor as well as the combat abilities makes it a overall straight upgrade. It is more expensive and it comes later though. You have to make the decision though, do you want Nuln Ironsides or Hochland long rifles? The increased range, the Hochland long rifles will get off more shots, but they will die in melee combat. If you're fighting a unit that loves range units like the Wood Elves, the High Elves, those are the big ones that love range all the time. This is actually a very good unit because it will stand up in range combat for quite a while, so long as you can get off straight shots. Because if they're up the hill, your units won't shoot them well. If they're over a hill, you won't shoot. If you've got units in front, they won't shoot. Little finicky. Hopefully you can figure that out though. And then the last one we're going to look at here for missile cavalry and chariots before we hit war machines. The Empire has a very weak collection of missile cavalry. To be fair, most factions do. Pistoliers are a unit that you're really only going to use early game. They are actually a decent skirmishing unit. They are fast. They do a decent amount of damage so long as the enemy doesn't have armor. Honestly, if I start the game with a couple of these, I keep them around until they die. They're not very good though. They will kill stuff like warhounds or small flanking units. They will lose in a combat with basically everything, and unfortunately they only have 12 ammunition, which is not really even enough to kill a full warhound unit on its own, so just be aware of that. They can be used to flank and charge in the back of enemy lines while they're engaged with your infantry, but they're still gonna die. Honestly, I would skip unless you start with them or you have bonuses to them. Now, the upgraded version of that is Outriders. So if we look at the difference, better range, better missile strength, and their armor piercing. Outriders can justifiably be used in an Empire army for quite some time. They are very good at killing off enemy cavalry units, assuming they don't get caught. Their speed is not the best, and sometimes the skirmish mechanism of shoot then run away they struggle with. You might have to micromanage them, but they're actually decent of riding behind enemy lines, firing a couple times, and then riding away. Make of that what you will. The next one is War Wagons. I can't say I'm the biggest lover of the Empire chariots. I know some people enjoy them. They're armored, armor-piercing missiles. They move quickly, got decent stats. They can charge into enemy lines or enemy archers and do something. Very small unit size, so just be aware if the enemy has units that are very good at targeting and killing single units, like lords with range, or for example Hochland long rifles, this unit struggles immensely because they will die fairly fast. They have good range, good missile strength, they will kill some stuff. Honestly though, I tend not to use them. I prefer their upgraded versions. The next one is Outriders with grenade launchers. These guys are kind of interesting. If you look at normal Outriders, more damage, less range, less ammo. This is actually a unit killer. Now, the Outriders normally are great at picking off and weakening enemies. Grenade launchers can actually kill a unit of zombies or a unit of swordsmen, for example. Against Skaven slaves, they're actually decent. The problem is, again, low ammo, low range, and unfortunately, they can't attack air, meaning if the enemy has flying units, you're going to struggle a bit. Can be brought. I would only bring 1 or 2 to any army, ever, basically. And honestly, you've probably got better war machines at this point. Now, the next one is war wagons with mortars. This is an interesting upgrade to the standard war wagons. Mortars for the Empire are low artillery and war machines. Now, if you put them on a chariot, they're slightly faster, so you can charge out, fire a couple times, then retreat and use them as a normal war wagon. But if we look at the difference here, they have roughly the same ammunition and other stats. The difference is this one can fight a little bit better. Great if you want to do some skirmishing techniques. Otherwise, I just skip this whole line of stuff and pretend it doesn't exist most days. Now, the last and arguably most important thing for the Empire is artillery and war machines. So using war machines takes some practice, especially since it's expanded. So definitely learn this before you jump into something like a multiplayer battle. The basic unit is mortars. Now, I would argue mortars are pretty good for a very long time. For a tier, well, in this case, tier 2, but I'm going to say tier 1 artillery unit that you get fairly early on. They do their job. They fire in a long arc, so they can fire over your units. They are particularly good at wiping out infantry units engaged with yours or advancing on your units. They're not going to win you the battle, but they'll probably get a good 60, 70, 80 kills given time. They are particularly vulnerable in melee, as are all artillery. So it's the last time I'm going to mention artillery fighting in melee combat because they're going to die. Keep them behind your units. Keep your ranged units in front of them and then your infantry in front of them, and you'll have a very strong battle line. Now, the next unit you get is great cannons. Great cannons are, again, they have some similar problems to the handgun units, as in they fire in a straight line, so terrain can mess them up, your own units can mess them up. Overall, though, I think they've gotten better in the recent patches at taking out enemy units. They're anti-large, which is nice. And they're actually really good at killing enemy artillery because they outrange a lot of units. Not all the Empire ones, but almost any other faction, they're the same range or greater. So they can target units that are far away. They can target giant units throwing stuff. They can even target lords and heroes, although I would say they do struggle to hit some of them. Decent. You've probably got better ones in the long run, though, especially since these fire in a fairly straight line. Now, the next unit is a Hellblaster volley gun. Now, this is one of your first units you're going to actually be able to wipe out enemy regiments with. Think early machine gun, basically. Good range, really good missile strength, and they fire fairly quickly, and they will devastate stuff. Now, you got to keep an eye on the ammunition. So anything that gives you additional ammunition on your artillery and war machines really helps them from tech or heroes or lords. Now, the Hellblaster volley gun is great. You position it properly, have it fire into the enemy units, you will wipe out them. Just make sure you're targeting good units with this. And by which I mean, don't shoot the Skaven slaves, don't shoot the zombies, shoot the Grave Guard, shoot the Stormvermin, shoot the Warriors of Chaos with halberds. They will do significantly better at that. They are very powerful. I really do like this unit. Can be a little finicky to aim right, though. However, everything the Hellblaster volley guns do, I recommend the next unit much better. And in fact, I would take over the volley guns. This is the Hellstorm rocket battery. This is kind of the quintessential, this is the Empire's artillery stuff. These are very powerful rocket batteries. They fire from a huge range. They're not very accurate. They're anti-infantry. They pierce armor. They have a decent amount of ammunition. They are good. If the enemy groups up, this will devastate them. Again, make sure they're firing on the right targets. So you may have to micro-aim these. As in, you choose the target, don't let them fire at will, for example. Although I would say leave them on fire at will unless you see them shooting zombies. Overall, better than anything else that's come before, and in some ways better than what comes after them. I really like them. They're really good. Bring 2 or 3 of them to your army. You will never regret it unless the enemy flanks you and kills you, but that's your problem. The next one we have is the Luminarch of Haish. Not sure how to pronounce it. This is a magic chariot unit. It's ranked as tier 5. I would rank it a little lower in my opinion. It has armor piercing missiles, a bolt of illumination. You can look into some more of that. It lowers recharge for enemies, so it can really help versus spellcasting factions. It does a significant amount of damage into missile strength. You just have to make sure it hits and make sure that it doesn't get grabbed, and it's very slow. Particularly good at picking off enemy lords and heroes, I find. Not the best at killing large amounts of enemy units. As in, think of it as a sniping artillery unit compared to the Hellstorm rocket battery, which is more multi-purpose but better at killing large numbers. Now, the next one is the land ship. This was recently added. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of it. I feel like it's just a different version of the steam tank. Some people really love it though. It's a ship on land with guns. It's decent. It fires fairly well. It can fire while moving, which is nice. It has a couple passives. It can charge forward. In melee combat, it's not great, but it's heavily armored, lots of hit points, good range, good missile strength, really good ammunition, which is nice for an Empire unit. If it gets jumped on in melee, it'll survive. If it shoots at range, it'll kill things. Overall good, just again, beware of terrain when using it. Now, the last one, and the iconic Empire thing, is the steam tank. If you're used to like World War II tanks, this is not the same thing. This is basically a cannon that is armored and really heavily armored. Now, it's got some changes, so those of you who've used in the past, be aware that the shields are slightly different. It's got what they call a directional missile block. It'll block a lot from the front, very little from the sides, and from the rear, it will die to range, assuming they have armor piercing. Because this thing is heavily armored. If this thing gets jumped in melee, it will probably be one of the last things in your army to die, unless a lord or hero comes up against it. It is unbreakable, which is really nice on an artillery unit. Sadly, it can get sniped by enemy lords or spellcasters. Just be aware of that. And now the next one you have... Oh, sorry, I should say the steam tank is basically a single shot cannon. The next one here is a steam tank with volley gun. It's basically an upgraded version of the Hellblaster volley guns. So think of it the great cannons upgrade into the steam tank. The Hellblaster volley guns upgrade into the steam tank volley gun. They're slightly worse at what the lower tiers do, because they're not as specialized, but this thing, again, is really hard to kill. If you bring 2 or 3 of these to an army, you won't regret it. Which would I take between the steam tank and the steam tank with volley gun? Honestly, I'm leaning more towards the steam tank volley gun as I play more of the game. They hit more units, and usually the biggest problem in Total Warhammer 3 is killing all the chaff units so that the great lords and heroes can kill each other. This does its job. It's very good at it. Anyway, outside of that, what do we have for lords and heroes? So I'm not going to go as in depth on this, but I'll go through them quickly. We're not going to do any of the specialized ones. So the first one is an Arch-Lector, has battle prayers, and is armored. Again, this is a lord, so you got your standard upgrades, yellow, blue line, red line. They tend to get battle prayers to boost melee units around them. They get the Shield of Faith, getting damage resistance to unit, and Soul Flare, which is not magic, but kind of is. It's basically a blast spell around the Arch-Lector. Again, this is also seen over here with the Warrior Priest. It's the same thing, but the Arch-Lector is, being a lord, slightly better at what it does and has more upgrades. Honestly, though, if you just think of it as a lord version of the Warrior Priest, you're not wrong. This has its place in armies. It will give replenishment if it's a Warrior Priest, which the Empire sadly lacks replenishment easily outside of one tech. In that sense, you want to have one of these in every army. The ability to buff your melee units, give them this increased, 24 melee attack, means your halberdiers become absolutely monstrous killing machines for a little while. And the battle prayers here, Shield of Faith, allows you to give a ward save to the unit, which is useful if you're getting bombarded with magic, artillery, or you just need to keep your units alive for a while. It's particularly good against armor piercing, so just be aware of that. And Soul Fire is if you charge your Warrior Priest or Arc Lector into an enemy unit. You definitely want to use this, blast around them. Since it doesn't use Winds of Magic, you want to use these basically when they're up or when they're best used. They do have a fairly long cooldown, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 90 seconds. So you don't want to waste it on a small fight, but once the battle lines hit, cast away. Now, the next one is your standard General of the Empire, which is similar to your Empire Captain. Again, a Lord version and a Hero version. It's overall a fairly solid melee unit. It's got your standard foe seekers, upgrades. These are actually really good units, and I want you to understand why. The Empire lacks units that infantry units that can kill a lot of units and not die. The Empire Captain and the Empire General of the Empire are kind of fill that gap. I like to bring one Empire Captain to the battle. I don't tend to use General of the Empire. I have much better unit lords for that. But the Empire Captain, one of these can kill lots of chaff units and not take a lot of damage. It won't win against duelist lords, but against basically your chaff infantry units, even up till top tier infantry units, this guy will go even. He'll kill things, keep him in your line, and he will serve his purpose. He also has, in this bears special mention, he has access to the Hold the Line ability, which is an augment that gives melee defense and leadership to all your units around it. So you want him in your infantry line, and he will make it much harder to kill. Now, the next one we have is the Huntsman General for a Lord. This is the Lord I use the most outside of the legendary Lords because it gives increased replenishment, movement, ambush. His line abilities, I think they're mainly like yellow line stuff, are really good. Overall, he is not the best at fighting. He is not the best at killing things, but he does his job. He's a powerful ranged unit. He will get a good amount of kills. He can snipe things decently well. He has access to a couple spells here. Basically, he can throw an oil flask on a unit, light them on, cover them with oil, and then fire an arrow of Ashqui here, which basically causes an explosion, tons of magic units. It's a magic missile. You can use it 3 times. You have 3 oil flasks. Hit them with the oil first, then blast them with the arrow. Be aware you need line of sight, so you don't want to use this against units that are in your lines fighting your infantry. It's really hard to hit, but if they're standing behind the lines, very powerful. They also have Hail of Fire, which can boost enemies around them or your ranged units around them with a reload skill and flaming attacks. Great for if you're fighting the vampires or Nurgle, again, to stop the replenishment and healing. My favorite Lord to pick up, very useful. Now, the last standard generic one is the Master Engineer. Honestly, I don't love this that much. To be fair, I like the Huntsman General more. Basically, was what the dwarves had kind of before, as well as the Vampire Coast. Gives ammunition, allows some bombardment abilities. Pretty good at what it does. Terrible at fighting, low range, good missile strength. Think of it as a grenade launcher type character. Pretty good, boosts your ranged units around it, specifically artilleries and war machines, can make your Hellstorm batteries really powerful. Honestly, though, picking it as a Lord is wrong. Pick it as a hero unit, and it's much better at that. This is where I would much rather you use it as. It's basically the same unit, but you can then have a better Lord leading your army. Now, in terms of other heroes, there's a couple more. You have the Witch Hunter. I am really on the fence if Witch Hunters are worth using. They are good at killing things sometimes, but there's better ones. They're good at clearing corruption, at which they're really good at. They're not a great range unit. They're not a really good melee unit. They're blah. So think of this as a hero version of the Free Company Militia, but a single one with some other little tricks in there. He can fire while moving. He's got good amount of ammunition. He fires magical attacks, terrible range, decent melee strength. He's supposed to be used with this accusation ability to target an enemy lord or hero and then shoot them and kill them. I bring one to almost every army because it cures corruption as part of its line abilities, but overall it's not great. The melee attack and defense are bad. It can fight chaff units, but any decent melee unit that catches it is going to kill this guy. He'll take a while to kill. He's okay. I guess he's not as good as some of the other ones, but he does his job. Kills things, does some damage. Be aware, though, he does need line of sight to the target because he's using a gun. So don't put him in your line of infantry because he'll have skirmish started usually. He'll run behind the lines and then basically be useless. Takes a lot of micro to use properly. Now, that's all the generic ones. Now we're getting into the mages. I am not going to go through each mage. Basically, these are the various colleges of magic you have access to. Which ones of them are worth it? Well, offhand, Bright Wizards, which is your flame casters, Flamestorm, Burning Head are good. Amethyst can be good for large units. Purple Sun and Fate of Bejunia are pretty decent. Celestial Wizards, they're okay. I don't like Amber Wizards. Gold Wizards are particularly useful, especially if you use Searing Doom a lot, because they can deal armor piercing. Gray Wizards I almost never use. They have their purpose, buffing and debuffing the enemy. Honestly, though, you're probably better with killing ones. Jade Wizards are your healing wizards, worth bringing one in almost every large army because you can replenish the hit points of your fighters. Use it on your main infantry line to keep them alive, and they will actually win melee fights against people. Light Wizards, honestly, I don't use at all, basically. They can tie up enemies, make units unbreakable, but honestly, anything they do, you've got other mages that can do it. You do have access to a ton of mages, though, so play around, find which ones you like. My personal favorites, Bright Wizard, Celestial Wizard, and Jade Wizard. Anyway, that is all the units of the Empire, I believe. We're not going to go into any of the special ones. That would be in separate videos. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, again, like, comment, subscribe. Check out all the other videos. Leave your comments about what you think about the units, how you would use them. The Empire is a infantry line backed up by ranged units, backed up by artillery. Pretty straightforward. There's a reason they're considered one of the basic beginners factions. Jack of all trade, master of none. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.